Time now for the 10-minute war here on this week's episode of Michigan Podcast, and joined by our good friend who himself has quite a page following college football here on YouTube. Mark Rogers, good to see you, brother. How are you?
Good to see you, Steve. I miss my typical introduction as being the most reasonable Ohio State fan out there.
Well, because I'm about to propose something to you that might make you less reasonable of an Ohio State fan, okay? But I took care, before you came on, I took care of Ward Manuel's job of fixing Michigan's future.
Now, and I knew you would very capably, so I didn't want to take part in that.
That's all right. I appreciate it. Or at least, you know, it sounded good. Who knows if any of it's right or not, all right? Let's talk about euthanizing its present. Because I know your fan base got pretty upset at the news that broke earlier this week of Michigan pausing football activities for suspected positive tests. And the word was this morning that, hey, these were false positives. Michigan's going to go back out on the gridiron. And then word broke this afternoon, nope, they're still going to stay virtual. And I know there's talk about, you know, Michigan's just doing this to duck the beating that they're going to get in the game. I hope that is true. And I would be beyond ecstatic if they put this season out of its misery and we're using this as cover to not play out the next 2 weeks of the torture porn known as Michigan football. I don't know if Tipper Gore is still alive, Mark. But if she were, she'd be holding hearings right now in the Congress about why these games need to come with a warning label and should not be viewed by America's youths. This is beyond painful. You're watching a team quit and bleed out in real time. And with no crowd there, it just makes it sound even more and feel even more like you're watching Chopin's funeral march being played out in a football uniform. End it. Call Jack Kevorkian. I believe he was from the state of Michigan, as I recall. Have him pull up the van there outside Michigan Stadium and hit the switch, hit the kill switch, fire up the pipe, go ahead and pump in the gas. Not the type that makes a car go, but the type that makes the body stop, if you know what I'm saying. And make this end, please.
Steve, I know that you've taken a complete turn on this rivalry in the last 2 years and want no more of it. I cannot believe, though, that you as a competitor and want your program to be a competitor, want to take them off the field, even in what is most likely going to be a 5-touchdown beatdown. And Ohio State has not really shown us that they're that good yet. We know that the talent's on the roster, but they've got their issues as well. Not to the level of Michigan, of course, but still good enough to be 4-0.
Do they have motor function, Mark? They have motor function, right?
The last time I checked, yeah.
IQ above 14?
Something in that range.
Problem solved. They're good to go. They're going to name the score because this team don't want to play any more football and hasn't made it pretty obvious for the last few weeks, Mark.
Okay, so does the Michigan fan not want to play this game for these reasons? In addition to the beatdown, that there could be a situation in which Ohio State is deprived of the Big Ten championship opportunity because of a cancellation against Michigan. And that would be almost, you know, we could go back to 1973 and the vote that sent Ohio State to the Rose Bowl. We could go back to Woody going for 2. We could go to a number of narratives and pit stops along the way that have made this tradition, this rivalry, this legacy of the two programs against each other so historic. But this might be the ultimate one-upsmanship, the ultimate.
Yeah, that doesn't do anything for me. I think if we were more competitive, first of all, you know me, I don't even think it's a rivalry. It's not. It's a tradition, but it's not a rivalry. You know, it's a great tradition, kind of like the turkey has with a knife every fourth Thursday in November, right? That's not a rivalry. It's not a rivalry. The turkey gets slaughtered and dismembered by said knife every Thanksgiving, but it is a grand tradition. But
why do you think Ohio State fans, and not just fans, the program is still that obsessed with Michigan to have the calendars and the clocks running posted in the athletic facilities and all that's devoted and
same reason I was obsessed with Sparta High School when I was playing basketball at Rogers High School way back in the day in West Michigan, a school that no longer exists. I was obsessed with Sparta. I was a kid that would come off the bench, but I was obsessed with Sparta. You know why? Because they were by far the worst team in the OK White Conference. The only time I ever scored 20 points in a high school basketball game ever, Mark, was against Sparta, right? So I was obsessed. First, we had to schedule every year. First thing I did, hey, when do we play Sparta High School? Because I knew, man, one shining moment, fired up. All right, I knew that was my game. That was my jam. I wasn't just going to be a spot, shooter, seventh or eighth guy off the bench. I'm playing 20, 30 minutes tonight, and Papa needs a new pair of shoes. You know what I'm saying? I got my basketball Jones. That's why y'all are obsessed. You're obsessed about the dude's face you keep caving in, and he keeps showing up to a re-cave in. I'd be obsessed about that too. So it's not a rivalry. It's a tradition. But again, it's a tradition like a turkey has with a knife every Thanksgiving. They always lose, okay? But everybody just shows up to watch. So if Michigan was more competitive in this rivalry, then yeah, I would take some sadistic satisfaction out of COVID denying Ohio State. But I am so beaten down, I don't even dislike Ohio State anymore. I don't even care. I just don't. So to me, it wouldn't matter if the next few games were Minnetonka State, Kyrgyzstan State, we were playing North Korea State. I wouldn't care. All right. I just hit the drip. I want this to end now. It just needs to end. Period.
Are you the Michigan fan who roots for Big Ten, other Big Ten teams in postseason play or in non-conference play, including Ohio State?
Now, before this current era of Michigan football crushed me, I was Mr. Big Ten camaraderie, esprit de corps. And then I got to be like, screw all y'all. But then we started this show a few years ago called Bigger Ten, so I'm back to being pro Big Ten again. So, but in general, if it's good for Michigan, I'm for it. Like, I've rooted for Ohio State when them winning a game would be good for us because that's good for us. Right now, though, there is nothing good. Dude, Michigan football is so bad. Did you see the release today of the Rivals recruiting rankings? Like, literally every kid we have committed dropped. Like, you even committing here, all right, it's like you've been scarlet lettered, all right? It's like every one of these kids that we are going to sign is called Nathaniel Hawthorne. So, no. I want this to stop the way you want a cancer to stop. This isn't a football season. It's a metastasizing tumor. Make it end.
That's it, Steve. Okay, take yourself out of the mix as a fan and think of it objectively, as you are wanting to do, just as a college football analyst. Do you realize that we're in a situation in which the Big Ten could be sending the wrong team to its championship game? That they have set up guidelines and stipulations and rules of this 6-game requirement that would, okay, let's play out the scenario. Indiana most likely plays its next 2 games. They finish 7-1, and Ohio State, let's say, only can play one of the 2 games, and they finish 5-0. Mm-hmm. Okay, I can understand there being an argument there. Okay, 7-1 versus 5-0, even though conventional wisdom is that Ohio State's going to beat their other 2 opponents that they didn't get a chance to play, Maryland and either Michigan or Michigan State. But I get we can't assume things. 7-1 could be considered better than 5-0 because you have to have a minimum games standard. Okay, I still don't like and don't feel that the 7-1 team that lost to the 5-0 team should go. But let's say, and we're seeing games drop like flies constantly, 19 last weekend across the nation. Let's say Indiana can't play their final 2 games and they finish 5-1, and Ohio State's 5-0. These Big Ten rules are going to send, unless there are 18 games canceled in the Big Ten, which there won't be, there have to be another 12 games canceled to lower that threshold of games that qualify. I
believe 12 of the final 14 games would have to be canceled to lower that threshold, which isn't going to happen. Right.
And if that happens, we have bigger issues.
Right.
Then the Big Ten is going to be sending a 5-1 Indiana team to the Big Ten championship game and sending a 5-0 Ohio State team that's still going to be playing that weekend, just going to play Wisconsin or somebody. And you're going to have an eligible team that's healthy enough and meets the requirements that's going to be playing that weekend, that's 5-0, that beat the 5-1 team. It's almost like this, Steve. You're a Major League Baseball fan. How did they determine the batting champion? It's obviously the best batting average in the league. Well, if you go 40 for 100, and there's 100 plate appearances necessary to win the batting championship, and you're 40 for 100, and I'm 50 for 90, I don't win the batting championship, right? No, Major League Baseball has a reasonable stipulation that we can add on the plate appearances that determine that I would win the batting champion regardless, the championship regardless. So you give me the 0 for 10, I'm 50 for 100, I win the batting championship. Give Ohio State a loss, give them a forfeit, whatever you need to do technically to send them to the Big Ten championship game at 5-1.
There's a simple solution, because you could run into a situation, okay, one team plays 2 or 3 games then. You know what I mean? Okay? So
Yeah.
there needed to be some minimum threshold, or the way you get around the minimum threshold is if, to me, and this is what I would have done, and I think we should have done this in every sport, that part of getting to play this year is navigating the protocols. That's part of the expectation. Just like we have expectations in college sports, you have to have a minimum grade point average, right? Expectations in college and pro sports, certain substances that you can't test positive for, right? Okay. There are always expectations you have to navigate away from the field of play in order to get on the field of play. This year we have an added one called COVID. Now, the precautions of this league are ridiculous. We've been talking about that from the beginning. And now we're starting to see the contact tracing that we were told we would not have to see because of the daily antigen testing, right? Now we're getting kind of the worst of both worlds now. Now we're getting this 21-day, off period and all these other, draconian measures that the other leagues don't have. But then we're getting the contact tracing that the other leagues do have. So we're getting the worst. We were led to believe, and I thought, that the daily antigen testing would save us from all the speculation of contact tracing. But alas, it apparently is not. It's not as bad as what you're seeing in some of these leagues where teams are going on the field with 44 guys. But we are seeing contact tracing on top of everything else. Here's what should have happened. And I firmly believe that if Graham Mertz had not tested positive, Wisconsin would have played that week. And I firmly believe that if it was not a divisional opponent, because now Ohio State's going to play this week. Smart move. Hey, take the week against the non-divisional opponent off and get your ducks in order and then go play your divisional opponents. See, what should have happened is this. If you can't play that week, it is a forfeit. No minimum threshold of games. Any games that cannot be played are a forfeit. If the team that you were scheduled to play can't play, you get a win. And if you're the reason that nobody could go, that the game couldn't be played, you get the L. And they should have done that when they screwed up and delayed the season so we couldn't have any bye weeks. Now, these other leagues that have bye weeks built in, that have schedule flexibility, you don't have to do that. You have makeup dates. But our league, we didn't have that. And so if you're going to try to play 8 games in 8 weeks, what we should have said is, okay, if you're the reason why a game can't get played, you forfeit. Period. That's a loss. So Wisconsin, you took a loss in that game against, what was the first one they had canceled? I want to say it was Purdue, right? Huh? Nebraska, that's right. So Nebraska, you won that game 2-0. Ohio State, you didn't want to play Illinois last week. You said you could have, but you didn't, out of abundance of caution. Cool, Illinois, win. That's what should have happened. No minimum threshold, but if you are the reason that the game cannot be played, that is a forfeit and a win for the other team.
Well, I can agree with that, but I can also agree with taking it that medium step, that at least if the thresholds are met, meaning that it's safe to play by the league standards, and then a Wisconsin steps out and says, well, we don't really feel comfortable playing, that opt-out should not have been available, and that should definitely be a forfeit.
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely. But listen, you're going to have a hard time getting any sympathy for me at the moment. I'm looking for Jack Kevorkian's bus. Okay, I'm looking for his van to pull up outside of Michigan Stadium right now, Mark. Y'all can have your playoffs and championships. We don't know what those are at Michigan. We're being utterly and totally humiliated. This is worse than Rich Rod holding hands to Josh Groban. It's the worst I've ever seen. by far, because we have better players now than we had when those guys played. Something like 17 four-star recruits are not playing any kind of significant minutes on defense right now. It's just some kind of obscene number like that. I mean, I don't know what we do. Hassan Haskins got a 60-yard run and then didn't get another carry for 30 minutes of live action. He wasn't hurt. I don't. You know, the coach's kid gets not one but two position coaching jobs. He has no qualifications for. What's going on here is beyond. It's not a disaster. It's not a hot mess. It's Chernobyl, man. So I would love to have the laments and complaints you all do about minimum thresholds. We're at a maximum threshold of toxicity and frustration. So you all can have your minimum thresholds, Mark.
I just didn't expect it to see it with the guy that you've got on the sideline with the way the teams performed for the first few years.
Oh, did you hear about what happened where there was a Michigan Daily reporter who was allowed to sit behind the bench, the only media person out there on the field, not in the press box, okay? And they sat behind the bench. That catch that A.J. Henning, the freshman receiver, made, that great catch where he jumped over that guy, right? And I joked on Twitter, hey, given the way we coach, that kid won't play another snap rest of the game. Didn't play rest of the game after that. After that, made a great play, back to the bench, okay?
It must be part of the process,
Yes,
Steve.
that's part of the process that Jim Harbaugh is talking about, yes. And so anyway, he gets up and makes a great catch. And the Michigan Daily reporter said the sideline was so dead that Jim Harbaugh had to turn around and yell at the players to get up and cheer for their teammate. Mm. That's a true Jeb Bush, please clap. And that's when you know it's bad. You get the last word, Mark.
Well, I was caught into this news conference that Jim Harbaugh had the other day. And certainly, yes, Nick Saban's famous for spouting about the process. And there does need to be a process. But usually when you're defending the process, you're defending that within the first few years. And then the results come. If they can't come immediately, you're telling people, okay, we have a process. Whether it be an office or a factory, whatever the business organization, you come in and you say, you know, we got 12 people working in that area. We only need 9. Let's move those 3 over here. The conveyor belt's running too slow. Let's speed it up a tick. Let's do X, Y, and Z. Let's start a Slack channels for better communication between whatever needs to be done. And it's reasonable to think we're going to take a step back in productivity for a period of time until everybody catches up. We get everybody on the same page. We get some people out of the organization that need to go somewhere else, and then the results follow. That Jim Harbaugh explanation or defense of his process was mind-boggling.
Well, at least you didn't call it a 5-year plan. All right, anyway, Mark, good to see you, brother. As always, all right. Take care. Merry Christmas. Yep.